Colonel Jacob Mercer didn't even lift his eyes from the rangefinder when he threw out the dry remark, "Let the men handle this, sweetheart." Silence instantly fell across the shooting range. 12 elite marksmen from different special operations units had already failed to hit the target from nearly 4 kilometers away. Every one of them carried combat medals, classified missions, and years of battlefield experience. Yet now, all eyes were fixed on one person, Sergeant Alice Carter. To them, she was just a woman in tactical gear. They didn't know about Operation Black Ridge in the mountains of Montana. They didn't know about the shot she fired through a blizzard during a mission in Alaska. They didn't know her real call sign. And within minutes, their confidence was about to collapse as quickly as the desert heat shimmer above the range. Fort Granite military base, buried deep within the endless plains of Texas, was waking beneath a brutal morning sun.
The clock read 05:40. The air was dry, scorching, motionless. Dust drifted low across the ground, while the metal structures of the range already radiated heat. Alice stood several feet behind the firing line, quietly observing another failed attempt. She was 30 years old, slim, not particularly tall, with the dangerous calm in her eyes that only came from real combat. Her light brown hair was tied tightly back, a thin scar cut above her right eyebrow. Her uniform looked worn, frayed sleeves, sand stains across the knees, faded patches. The kind of uniform worn by someone who spent more time in the field than behind a desk. Beside her stood Captain Rebecca Hall from Military Intelligence. She was the only person there who wasn't looking at Alice with skepticism. Rebecca had served in Chicago, Washington, and on classified installations in Colorado. She knew how to notice things other people ignored. And right now, she saw something dangerous. Absolute control.
"You just gonna watch?" Rebecca asked quietly. Alice didn't answer immediately. Her eyes followed the splash of dust far beyond the target. Another miss. "They're fighting the rifle," she finally said calmly, "instead of letting it work." Rebecca narrowed her eyes. "You really think you can do better?" Alice looked toward the horizon. "I don't think. I know." Another command rang across the range. Another shooter settled behind the heavy Barrett M99 long-range system while the spotter rapidly called corrections. "Wind 3.2 from the left. Temperatures rising. Hold lower." Shot fired. A heavy recoil thudded through the weapon. Another miss. Even the instructors were beginning to look nervous now. The target stood on a distant rocky ridge in Arizona, several kilometers beyond the range. Through the heated air, it looked like nothing more than a blurred speck. At that distance, even the smallest temperature shift could throw the bullet off. Wind, pressure, earth rotation. Every detail mattered. Colonel Mercer removed his headset and exhaled heavily. "That's enough." Nobody moved. He slowly turned toward the group. "If even you people can't make the shot, then nobody's making it today."
That was when Alice stepped forward, slowly at first, then with complete confidence. The men exchanged looks. Someone smirked. Someone rolled their eyes. One of the Marines muttered quietly, "Well, this should be entertaining." Alice ignored them. She walked to the equipment table and silently checked the rifle. Her fingers moved quickly and precisely, like she had done this thousands of times before. Mercer crossed his arms skeptically. "You even know the distance?" 3,790 yards, she answered calmly. Several people looked surprised. Plus, unstable northern wind and a strong thermal current over the canyon. Now everyone fell silent. For the first time that morning, Mercer truly looked at her. "How do you know that?" Alice inserted the magazine smoothly.
Because I've seen conditions like this before. Where? She raised her eyes, and for the first time, something dark appeared inside them. Alaska. Rebecca Hall noticed the change in Mercer's expression immediately after hearing that word, like he had just heard a name he never wanted to hear again. The colonel silently stepped aside. Alice lowered herself behind the rifle. The entire range became quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop. She rested her cheek against the stock and looked through the scope. Instantly, the world narrowed. Now there was only her breathing, and a tiny target somewhere far beyond the horizon. Everyone around her froze. Nobody laughed anymore, because in that moment, every single person there suddenly realized one simple thing. This woman was not a beginner, and maybe they had just seriously underestimated her. Alice's finger slowly settled onto the trigger. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't even glance back at the people behind her. To her, they had already disappeared. Only numbers remained. Wind, temperature, humidity, air movement. She took one slow breath, then another. The spotter beside her swallowed nervously. "Wind's shifting," he whispered. "I know." Her voice was calm, almost cold. Colonel Mercer watched her carefully through dark sunglasses. He didn't like the feeling growing inside him, like he had seen this before somewhere long ago, and it had ended badly. Alice adjusted the rifle slightly, barely noticeable. "She's not even using her correction chart," one of the snipers whispered. "Nobody shoots like that." Rebecca Hall stayed silent. She was watching Alice's hands. No shaking, no unnecessary tension. That was how people looked when they had faced death so many times they stopped fearing it. Alice held her breath and squeezed the trigger. The shot ripped across the range. The heavy round exploded out of the barrel with violent force. Almost 5 seconds passed. Nobody moved. Then, far beyond the shimmering horizon, a metallic impact echoed back. Sharp, loud, perfect. The target disappeared. Absolute silence swallowed the range. One of the Marines slowly lowered his binoculars. "Impossible." Another man laughed nervously. "No, I saw it. She hit it." The spotter turned sharply toward Mercer. "Direct impact." The colonel said nothing. His jaw tightened hard. Alice calmly lifted her eye from the scope and began unloading the rifle like she hadn't just done something impossible. One of the instructors stepped closer. "Who the hell are you?" She didn't answer. "You Delta?" Silence. "SEAL Team 6? No reaction. Then Mercer suddenly cut in sharply. "Enough." Everyone fell silent. His voice had come too fast, too hard, like he was afraid someone would ask another question. Alice stood up. She had just started walking away when a secure phone clipped to Rebecca Hall's belt vibrated. Rebecca glanced at the screen. Her face changed instantly. "Sir?" Mercer turned toward her. "What?" "Emergency signal from Nevada." "What kind of signal?" Rebecca hesitated for a second. Red Canyon facility stopped responding. Tension appeared immediately across Mercer's face. Several people nearby didn't understand the meaning of that name, but Alice did, and it showed. She froze instantly. Mercer noticed. "You know what that facility is?" Alice slowly looked at him. "Yes." "How?" For several seconds, she stayed silent, then quietly said, "Because I was the last person who survived there." The air suddenly felt heavier after those words. One of the younger snipers forced an awkward smile.
What the hell does that even mean? Nobody answered him. Rebecca looked only at Alice, and for the first time since meeting her, she saw fear in her eyes. Not doubt, not nervousness. Real fear. Mercer slowly stepped closer. I thought everything connected to that operation was buried. It was. Then why are you here? Alice didn't answer. Somewhere above the base, a military transport aircraft roared through the sky.
Its distant thunder rolled across the desert. Because they came back, she said quietly. Mercer froze. That's impossible. That's what I thought too. Rebecca looked between both of them. Can somebody explain what's happening? Mercer stayed silent. He looked at Alice like she was a ghost from his past, then suddenly barked an order. Everybody leave the range. Nobody argued. The shooters quickly started walking away. Within less than a minute, only 3 people remained. Mercer, Rebecca, and Alice. The colonel slowly removed his sunglasses. His eyes looked cold now. Tell me one thing. Alice stayed silent. Do you still use your old call sign? Several seconds passed before she answered, then quietly said, Ghost 1 died in Nevada. And at that exact moment, somewhere deep inside Fort Granite, the emergency sirens began screaming.
The sirens tore through the air with a sharp metallic howl. Red emergency lights flashed across the main hangars of Fort Granite as soldiers immediately began moving. Some sprinted toward the command center, others ran for armored vehicles and weapons lockers. Helicopters were already lifting into the sky above the base. Rebecca Hall looked around in confusion. What the hell is happening? Colonel Mercer grabbed his radio instantly. Command, this is Mercer. Confirm source of the alarm. Only static answered at first. Then a nervous voice finally came through. Perimeter breach in Sector D12. Multiple casualties. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Who attacked us? The response came after several seconds of silence. We don't know. Alice was already staring toward the southern hangars.
Her eyes narrowed. They're here. Mercer turned toward her. You can't possibly know that. Yes, I can. Her voice stayed calm, cold, certain. They always start with communications. Rebecca looked at her carefully. Who are they? Alice slowly turned her head. People who officially don't exist. At that exact moment, a heavy explosion thundered across the base. A column of black smoke erupted near the storage sector. Then the gunfire started. Short automatic bursts echoed through Fort Granite. Mercer instantly pulled his pistol. Bunker, now. Alice didn't move. She stared at the smoke like she was remembering something. Same pattern. What? Rebecca asked. They always come through the shadows. Rebecca grabbed her arm. Alice, this is not the time for riddles. Alice pulled away sharply. You don't understand. Another explosion, closer this time. Emergency floodlights flickered on around the base. Soldiers sprinted between buildings while screaming voices flooded the radios. We've got wounded! Sector C is compromised! Unknown hostiles are jamming communications! Mercer looked hard at Alice. How many? She answered almost instantly. 4. You're joking. No. How do you know? Her voice turned colder. Because that's their standard formation. Rebecca felt a chill crawl down her spine. Who the hell are these people? Alice stayed silent for several seconds, then finally spoke. Night Hunters Program. Mercer closed his eyes for a moment. Like he had just heard the worst word from his past. We shut that program down 10 years ago. No, Alice answered quietly. You just lost control of it. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the far end of the range. Tall, dressed completely in black tactical gear, face hidden behind a mask, a suppressed compact rifle held loosely in his hands. The stranger stood perfectly calm in the middle of the chaos around him, like bullets meant nothing. One of the soldiers spotted him first. Contact! automatic fire erupted immediately. Bullets slammed into concrete around the figure. He didn't even flinch. Then he moved forward. Fast. Inhumanely fast. A suppressed shot cracked through the air.
One soldier collapsed instantly. Second shot, another body hit the ground. Rebecca froze. Jesus. Alice was already reaching for her rifle. Her expression changed completely. Cold, focused, deadly. I know him. Mercer stiffened. Who is that? Alice stayed silent for several seconds, then quietly said, Cole Vaker. Even Mercer went pale. He's dead. No. The man in black slowly turned his head toward them. Even from that distance, it felt like he was staring directly into their souls. Then he raised one hand and showed Alice 2 fingers, an old military signal. Second squad. At that exact moment, every light behind them suddenly died. Complete darkness swallowed Fort Granite. And inside that darkness, Alice whispered quietly, They came for me.
Darkness swallowed the base instantly. Only red emergency lights flickered between the hangars and concrete walls of the command sector. Gunfire echoed from every direction now. Wounded soldiers screamed. Radios crackled nonstop. Explosions shook the ground beneath Fort Granite. The entire base had turned into a war zone. Rebecca Hall pressed herself against an armored container, breathing hard. Somebody please tell me this is just a nightmare. Colonel Mercer checked the magazine in his pistol. Afraid not. Alice stood several feet ahead of them, completely motionless. Her eyes stared deep into the darkness between the hangars, like she was waiting for something. And seconds later, they all heard it. Slow footsteps, heavy boots scraping against concrete. One figure, then another, then a third.
Men dressed entirely in black tactical gear slowly emerged from the smoke like ghosts. No panic, no rush, like the entire base already belonged to them. Rebecca nervously raised her weapon. Why aren't they shooting? Alice answered quietly. Because they want us afraid. Cole Vaker appeared last, slowly removing his mask. Rebecca froze instantly. The left side of his face was covered in old burn scars. Dark metallic plates were fused beneath his skin. One eye looked unnaturally pale, almost artificial. You look terrible, Cole, Alice said coldly. He smiled slightly. And you're still cruel. Mercer tensed immediately. You were supposed to die in Nevada. I was, Cole nodded slowly. But your scientists hated losing expensive toys. Rebecca looked toward Mercer. What the hell is he talking about? Mercer stayed silent, and somehow that silence terrified her more than the gunfire. Alice never took her eyes off Cole. What do you want? You. The answer came instantly.
Without hesitation, another explosion thundered somewhere behind them. One of the hangars erupted into flames. Soldiers across the base were still trying to hold the perimeter, but it was obvious now. They were losing. The night hunters moved too fast, too perfectly coordinated, like they could predict every move before it happened. You brought an entire team here just for me? Alice asked. Cole laughed quietly. You still don't understand what you really are. Rebecca frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Cole looked directly at her. They never told you? Shut up, Alice snapped immediately. But it was already too late. Cole stepped closer. Ghost One wasn't just another soldier. Rebecca slowly lowered her weapon. What? Mercer closed his eyes like he already knew what was coming. She was The first successful prototype. The world around them suddenly felt silent. Even the explosions in the distance sounded muted now. Rebecca stared at Alice like she was seeing her for the first time. Is that true? Several long seconds passed before Alice finally answered. Yes. Rebecca stepped backward in shock. No. They erased my name, Alice said quietly. They broke me down for years, trained me, injected me with drugs, turned me into a weapon. Cole's smile widened, and she became the best. Alice suddenly raised her rifle. I said, shut up! The shot cracked through the darkness. The bullet missed Cole's head by only inches, but he didn't even flinch. See, he whispered, they still live inside you. At that exact moment, a night hunter sniper appeared on top of a nearby hangar. A red laser crossed Mercer's chest. Alice noticed instantly. Down! She slammed Mercer onto the concrete just as the sniper fired. The bullet ripped through the metal wall exactly where Mercer had been standing a second earlier, and immediately, Alice returned fire.
Alice's shot rang out almost simultaneously with the sniper's second round. Her bullet shattered the floodlight above the hangar, sending sparks raining through the darkness, while the sniper's silhouette vanished instantly into the smoke. Mercer pushed himself up off the concrete, still trying to process how close death had just come. Rebecca stood frozen, staring between Alice and Cole as her mind struggled to connect everything she had heard. "You were one of them," she whispered. Alice didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on the black-clad figures slowly surrounding them. Cole stepped forward again, the flames from the burning hangar reflecting off the metal fused beneath his scarred skin. "We're not your enemies, Alice." "Don't call me that." His smile widened slightly. "Then what should I call you? Ghost 1? Subject 7? Or maybe the number they burned into your head?" Rebecca looked sharply at Alice. "What is he talking about?" "Not now," Alice answered coldly. But Cole kept walking. "They built us under Red Canyon. Children with no pasts, soldiers without fear, and she was the best one they ever created." Mercer's jaw tightened. "That's enough." Cole turned slowly toward him. "You really think you still deserve to give orders? This entire nightmare started because of you." Mercer stayed silent, and somehow that silence was worse than any confession. Rebecca felt cold crawl through her chest. "Sir, is it true?" Mercer lowered his eyes. "The program was supposed to create the next generation of soldiers. We believed we could control it. But you lost control," Alice finished quietly. Suddenly, one of the night hunters exploded forward from the darkness. Fast, animal fast. Rebecca barely had time to raise her weapon before Alice moved. She spun sideways, grabbed the attacker's arm, and slammed him violently into the concrete. Bones cracked loudly. The rifle flew from his hands. A second strike crushed his throat. The entire fight lasted less than 2 seconds. Rebecca stared at Alice in horror. "Jesus Christ!" Alice breathed heavily, and for a moment, something terrifying flashed across her face. Something cold, something old. Like the weapon they created was still buried inside her somewhere. Cole noticed immediately. "There she is," he whispered. "The real you." "Shut up!" Alice shouted. She grabbed the dead attacker's pistol and opened fire toward the advancing night hunters. The base erupted into chaos again. Bullets ripped across the hangars. Soldiers screamed through the smoke. One man nearby dropped before he could even cry out. Mercer grabbed Rebecca's arm. "We need to reach the underground sector." "Why?" "The central server for the Night Hunters program is down there. If they get it, this starts all over again." Alice turned sharply toward him. "They're already heading there." Cole slowly nodded. "Still smarter than everyone else in the room." Then suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently. A massive explosion thundered somewhere below the base. Cracks split across the concrete as smoke burst from underground ventilation shafts. Everyone froze for one brief second.
Then footsteps echoed from the dark entrance leading into the underground complex. Slow, heavy, inhuman. Even Cole stopped smiling. Alice's face went pale instantly. "No!" Rebecca looked at her. "What is down there?" Alice never took her eyes off the darkness. Something that never should have woken up. The footsteps from the underground complex grew louder with every second. Slow metallic thuds echoed through the concrete tunnels beneath Fort Granite. Everyone froze. Even the night hunters stopped moving. Cole Vaker stared into the darkness without his usual smile, and for the first time, Rebecca saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Alice slowly stepped backward. "You were never supposed to open Sector Omega." Mercer's face lost all color. "We sealed it 10 years ago." Cole answered quietly, apparently not well enough. Then something emerged from the darkness. At first, it was only a silhouette. Tall, massive shoulders far too wide to look human. The emergency lights flickered again, and Rebecca nearly dropped her weapon. It had once been a man. Now, it looked more like a broken military machine stitched together with flesh and steel. Metallic plates moved beneath torn skin. Half of its face was mechanical. Its eyes glowed with cold white light. Hanging from this chest was an old military tag. Adam Reyes. Alice froze completely. "Impossible," Cole whispered under his breath. "Prototype 0. Mercer slowly lowered his pistol. "He died during the first experiment." "No," Alice said quietly. "They kept him alive." The creature slowly raised its head. Then it looked directly at Alice, like it recognized her. The next second, the base shook from a roar that sounded nothing like a human voice. Something far worse. Adam Reyes exploded forward with terrifying speed. One of the night hunters opened fire, but the creature smashed straight through him and sent his body crashing through a concrete wall. Blood sprayed across the metal doors. Another attacker was grabbed by the head and hurled across the entire yard like a rag doll. Panic erupted instantly. Night hunters fired from every direction. Soldiers began retreating, but none of it mattered anymore. Whatever had escaped Sector Omega was killing everyone without distinction. Cole shouted for the first time, "Fall back!" But it was already too late. Adam Reyes tore through the attackers like they were nothing. Screams echoed through the darkness, one after another. Rebecca grabbed Alice's arm. "We have to leave!" But Alice stared only at the monster, and suddenly something changed in her expression. Realization. "No," she whispered. "If he gets outside this base, everything ends." Mercer looked at her carefully. "What are you thinking?" Alice slowly turned toward the underground reactor controls. "Sector Omega runs on an autonomous core. If I overload it..." Rebecca immediately shook her head. No, don't even think about it." Alice smiled sadly for the first time since any of this began. "I already died in Nevada, Rebecca. Nobody just noticed." Cole heard her.
"Alice, don't do this." She looked at him quietly. "You were supposed to stay dead too, Cole." For one brief second, something human passed between them again. Memories, regret, the lives stolen from both of them. Then Alice suddenly ran toward the underground entrance. "Ghost 1!" Cole shouted after her. But she disappeared into the darkness. Rebecca tried to run after her, but Mercer grabbed her arm hard. "You won't make it." "Let me go!" She already made her choice. Gunfire echoed below them. Then explosions. The emergency siren screamed louder than ever. A few seconds later, Alice's voice came through the emergency speaker system across the base. calm. Exhausted. All personnel, evacuate Fort Granite immediately.
That is an order. Rebecca froze. Alice? Only static answered at first. Then one final quiet word. Sorry. The transmission died. Cole stared into the darkness for several long seconds before slowly lowering his head. For the first time in years, he looked human again. Broken. Defeated. A moment later, the ground began shaking violently. Blinding white light erupted from beneath the underground sector. Mercer shouted, "Everybody run!" Helicopters lifted into the sky while soldiers abandoned weapons and sprinted toward evacuation zones. Rebecca looked back one final time, and in that final moment, she saw Alice, deep below the collapsing base, standing alone in fire and smoke with a pistol in her hand, facing Adam Reyes.
One lone figure standing inside hell itself. Then the light swallowed everything. The explosion consumed Fort Granite in a massive wave of fire. The night turned white. The shockwave erased hangars, vehicles, towers, concrete walls, everything. Flames rose high into the Texas sky, and within minutes, all that remained of the secret military base was a burning crater in the desert. The next morning, the United States government officially announced an accident at a classified military facility. Every file connected to the Night Hunters program was destroyed. The identities of the dead were sealed forever. But Rebecca Hall knew the truth. Sometimes late at night, she still remembered the last look in Alice Carter's eyes. The eyes of a woman turned into a weapon, who finally chose to die as a human being.